take it away. My right, I won't be quiet. My vote, my voice, my right. 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 My vote, my voice, my right.
Good evening and welcome to Marin TV's Election Night coverage on November 7th, 2017. With Greg Brockbank, I'm Peter B. Collins here at the Community Media Center of Marin. Our roving reporter Larry Strick will join us in just a moment. And Greg, this is an interesting local election. I went to my precinct and it was the fastest vote ever. There was nobody there and I had a single set of council races to vote on.
For the first time, many places had no elections, including San Rafael, because most of the school boards and special districts have moved to even-numbered years, leaving only a few council races. But as usual, a few councils did not have races, including San Rafael, where I live for the second time in a row, and also I think Tiburon and Mill Valley had already moved. Larkspur did not have a contest, but they're on the ballot anyway. But we're only going to focus on the 5 city council races primarily that were on the ballot, did have contests. And it's a pleasure to be here with you again after doing this a year ago and 3 years ago. We're making a habit out of this, and I enjoy it.
Well, Greg, it's good to be with you, too. And we're going to be talking with some of the candidates tonight. Barbara Kohler from Fairfax will be with us here in just a moment. Also, Kevin Morrison, the challenger, who made a mark, but it doesn't appear he will be elected to the Novato City Council. He's planning to join us in about half an hour. And Larry Strick has been roving all over Marin County. He's been in Sausalito, in Tiburon, in Fairfax. And in just a moment, we're going to connect up with Larry, who is at the Marinitas restaurant in San Anselmo, where there is a bit of a surprise because newcomer Brian Colbert is the top vote getter, besting Kay Coleman and John Wright, who are settled incumbents, and also squeezing out, at least based on the returns so far, Steve Burdo, who's an impressive younger candidate. This is his second run for the San Anselmo City Council, and it appears that Colbert is going to be the real surprise of the night.
I agree. He is an interesting guy. I've seen him in a couple of candidates forums, and looks like we're about ready to for Larry Strick to interview him in San Anselmo, but I doubt many people would have predicted that he would be the top vote getter, but that's what it looks like in the results so far, although the two incumbents did win re-election, and as you mentioned, Steve Burdo, a promising and impressive new candidate running for the second time, who many thought would win this race, or at least to come in third and grab a seat, apparently is not.
So let's go to Larry Strick, and he's talking with Brian Colbert, who has captured 26% of the vote according to the current tabulation in the San Anselmo City Council race.
Peter, Greg, I'm with Councilman-elect Brian Colbert.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm the first person to say that to you. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. It feels nice to hear it.
Brian is a 7-8-year resident here in Marin County. He works in San Francisco and he's an entrepreneur. I don't know what that ever means, but he does good things. How was it to run a race here in Marin for the first time?
It was great. It was a lot of hard work. It was invigorating, but it really connected me and tied me to people in the community. I did a lot of walking and connecting and meeting with folks.
What makes a guy like you with a beautiful daughter and a wife and a good job and a comfortable life want to be a public figure and a councilman?
When we first moved to San Anselmo, we didn't know anyone, and I was determined, since we were going to be here for a long time, to get involved and engaged in the community. And so I joined the Economic Development Committee. And as I became more involved in the community, I realized that families of young children were disconnected from the political process. And I thought, I can make a difference. I can connect with them and other stakeholders.
And it worked. So now you get this job. And what are your goals for your term?
So the first thing I think I want to do is really figure out how to keep young families and everyone more engaged in the political process. I'd really like to continue the work I've begun on the Economic Development Committee and contribute to the town's framework to improve the business climate and encourage motivated entrepreneurs to succeed in town.
I assume you walked a bunch of precincts here in San Anselmo and got to know a lot of the folks here in San Anselmo. What did you learn, or what do you think their needs are? What do they want for their government?
I think one thing is they want someone who can translate and connect them. How does town council affect their lives? And how can they reach out to town council with their concerns? I think the people in San Anselmo are deeply frustrated with the lack of tangible flood measures. They've paid a lot in taxes, they paid a lot in their flood fee, and so they really want to see something measurable made. I think they really want to sort of see what can the town do to recognize that while we are a small town in Marin and we're buffeted by regional and national economic concerns, what can we do to contribute to our thriving downtown, which I feel makes us unique in Marin?
Other than moving here and finding Marin and now being elected, you have a young daughter here, wife here, beautiful wife here who I saw. What and as you go to work in San Francisco and come back out here, do you think you could make a difference and teach people here in San Anselmo that their government is really working for them, and if they participate more, they'll get more out of it?
I think absolutely. And one of the things I did during my campaign was actually challenge people and say, I hear your concerns, but one thing that I'm going to ask for you to do is to stay engaged. I mean, council meetings are so important, and I know that council members are receptive and responsive. So when there's an issue that people really care about, I'm willing to do the hard work and sit through the meetings. But at that crucial point of inflection or decision making, I'm going to reach out to the community and say, look, let your voices be heard and make a direct impact in that way.
Well, Councilman-elect, good luck to you on that. It was really a pleasure meeting with you. I hope you enjoy your job, and we here in Marin are happy that you decided to help us out by providing good government. Thank you very much. It's nice meeting you.
Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to come down.
Larry Strick live from the Marinitas restaurant in San Anselmo with the gentleman who has surprised a lot of people in San Anselmo, Brian Colbert. He is currently the top vote getter with about 26% of the vote. Kay Coleman and John Wright, incumbents, are pretty handily reelected. And Steve Burdo, a strong challenger running his second time, is a strong fourth place with about 21% of the vote, but there are only 3 open seats. So that's what's shaping up as a pretty interesting race in San Anselmo tonight. And we're joined now here in the Community Media Center studios by Barbara Kohler, who is trending for re-election. After this is your second run, you were originally appointed to fill out an open seat. Welcome to our program tonight.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
So how did it happen? What's the secret sauce?
I don't know that there's a secret sauce. I've been on the council about 4.5 years, and my accomplishments, my priorities, I think fit with a large percentage of our town, and just my common sense, practical approach to getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you can easily predict these things, but as I told you a month or two ago, that you were very impressive, I thought, in the 2 countywide candidates forums. I saw you're very polished, very knowledgeable, very impressive. Won overwhelming endorsements by the county Democrats and by the Marin Women's Political Action Committee, 2 of the early sought-after endorsements. And you not only won those, everybody seemed to love you. And so I picked you for top vote getter by a considerable margin. So I'm a little surprised, but I'm not surprised you won. I'm just a little surprised that you weren't the top vote getter by a considerable margin.
Well, I think, there were a lot of folks, Bruce Ackerman, Cindy Swift, who really got out there and
Good challengers
pounded
both.
the pavement. They both did a great job, and so I salute both of them for their hard work. And I was the top vote getter my first time running, and so I appreciate your kind words, Greg.
And you and your fellow incumbent, John Reed, both of you winning re-election. But I understand in Fairfax and San Anselmo, the 2 hottest races with the most number of candidates, both of you had one incumbent stepping down and a number of, I hate to call them challengers, I call them new candidates, unless they're challengers in my mind only if they're running against all the incumbents. They weren't. They weren't necessarily running against the incumbents. They were running for the open seat. And they often walk a lot in Fairfax and San Anselmo, and I think that may be why Bruce Ackerman came out as a top vote getter, and maybe Brian Colbert in San Anselmo as well.
Barbara, let me ask you this. Do you feel that some of the anger that we saw in the communities a few years ago has subsided over housing and related issues?
Well, I can tell you, I think there's still a lot of divisiveness that is in Fairfax. I can't speak for other communities. And I hope that by some of our changes that we made, that we're bringing people together. And I hope this election kind of signals that people are looking for some steady leadership that is demonstrated. And a newcomer coming in who served on our planning commission and served the town for a number of years, I'm hoping it signals that we kind of have a new step forward, which we've been making progress on.
Now, one of the issues that has been, pretty sensitive in the Ross Valley is dealing with flood control and mitigation. Where do you think things stand with Fairfax and the proposal for a detention center at the old Sunnyside Nursery? That seems to be the last place that it could happen. Do you think there's support in the community, or do people just want to let that water flow?
I think it remains to be seen. Sometimes we see that people don't step up till things become more imminent, but there has been a lot of support for Sunnyside. And I think the sad news is we could have held more water with other detention basins, but I think if we are able to move forward with Sunnyside and able to move forward on the creek clearing out, the debris clearing out, and some of the lesser measures which still help, we're not going to contain a 100-year flood, but we are going to contain what's the years? Is it a 40-year flood? And I really think we can't turn our back on folks that flooded and will flood again, and even had some flooding this year. Smaller amount.
One last quick question. Thank you for asking about the flooding. And your point before that about what I sometimes call anti-incumbent fervor, you referred to housing and other things. 3.5 years ago at the county supervisor level, one incumbent who was thought generally would probably win, maybe narrowly, lost big, Susan Adams. Another incumbent was thought to win big, and she won re-election narrowly, Judy Arnold. That was 3.5 years ago. A year and a half ago, the two incumbents, Katie Rice and Kate Sears, both won more than expected. So maybe that anti-incumbent fervor, which comes and goes in waves, had kind of died back. And the fact that you and John Reed won re-election pretty handily in Fairfax, and that in San Anselmo the two incumbents also won re-election, means, again, that anti-incumbent fervor, maybe it's kind of a low ebb, but there again, in both San Anselmo and Fairfax, the top vote getters were new candidates.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I think it really shows you sometimes really working hard and pounding the pavement gets you to be the top vote getter.
And Barbara, as we wrap up with you, is there one issue that surfaced in your door knocking and community walking that isn't on our radar right now?
I think not really, but I will tell you that some of what my platform is really looking at getting back to some of the basics, maintaining our infrastructure. One of the things I did last year was run our sales tax measure. 2 years before that, I co-chaired a parcel tax measure, which a lot of that was for capital improvements, repairing our sidewalks, repairing our roads. We now have allocated about $1 million, some of which has really been my urging to do street repairs. And now we're going to start repairing downtown sidewalks, which is one of the things I pushed for with our sales tax. So I think we need to do some of these basic things to keep our towns running.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us
Thank you
this
for
evening,
having
and
me.
congratulations.
Thank
Barbara
you.
Kohler from Fairfax.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Careful
Stay
of
there
your,
for a minute, and I'll take your microphone.
Your microphone.
Okay.
And we'll hear from the other two winners in Fairfax, fellow incumbent John Reed, as mentioned, and new candidate and winner and top vote getter Bruce Ackerman, who were interviewed about an hour ago at the campaign party in Fairfax.
Yeah, we'll be hearing from them a little bit later this hour. We're expecting in about 15 minutes Kevin Morrison, the unsuccessful challenger in Novato, to be with us here in the studio. And I want to run down a couple of the races, and then we've got an interview that we'll bring you in a moment. But as you mentioned, Larkspur had 3 candidates for 3 seats, and so there was no competition, but Kevin Haroff, Catherine Way, and Daniel Hilmer are all returning to the council there. As we mentioned, Brian Colbert, who Larry Strick interviewed just a few minutes ago, is the top vote getter in the San Anselmo race with the current numbers. Kay Coleman, John Wright, re-elected, and Steve Burdo is the also ran challenger who's placing fourth according to the current numbers. And let's talk a little bit about Sausalito, where the candidates included Bill Werner and Melissa Blaustein, but the top vote getter with almost 47% in the early returns is Susan Cleveland-Knowles. And before we go to the interview, you have a comment about that?
I did. Sausalito is kind of an interesting case. They usually have their elections in even-numbered years. As I mentioned, everybody's moving to even-numbered years, but they've always had an even-numbered year. So what are they doing with an election in an odd-numbered year for a change? Well, they had a resignation, which happens once every 5 or 10 years, probably in most cities. A longtime incumbent resigned, and usually the city council interviews applicants to fill the seat because it's cheaper than holding a new election. And Sausalito tried to do that, and they got a lot of applicants. They interviewed the top 3 or 4 or 5, and they split down the middle 2-2 among the remaining 4 council members. So since they couldn't decide, they had to throw it open to a public election. Only 3 candidates ran in the public election. Susan Cleveland-Knowles, who looks like she's in first place by considerable margin, we'll hear from her in a minute, although she was interviewed over 2 hours ago before the initial results came out in Sausalito. And then there was Bill Werner and Melissa Blaustein, who came in a distant second and a distant third. But we'll hear from Susan Cleveland-Knowles.
Yeah, let's go to that report right now. Here's Larry Strick with Susan Cleveland-Knowles in Sausalito.
Greg, Peter, I'm with Susan Cleveland-Knowles, a 16-year resident of Sausalito, who's been on the Sausalito Planning Commission.
Yes, for 4 years.
For 4 years, and now she is a first-time candidate for the Sausalito City Council. How did the campaign go?
The campaign is going great so far. It's been really exciting. This is my first campaign, and it's been wonderful walking around Sausalito. I've gotten to meet so many great people, and I even had my 86-year-old mother-in-law out here knocking door to door for us, so it's been really fun.
The polls have not closed. The results are not in. Tell us what you've heard from the people in Sausalito and what did you learn and what do they need?
I have gotten a lot of positive feedback from the people in Sausalito. We've heard that people want a consensus builder, which is something that I've been able to do on the Planning Commission. I've heard that they want positive and sensible solutions for Sausalito, which is another one of my priorities. And I've heard that they're really interested in a candidate who's dedicated to the community and ready to roll up her sleeves and get to work.
My understanding is one of the concerns of Sausalito is a lot of people pedal in on bicycles or are coming into Sausalito on the weekends and really making the downtown vibrant, and some people think unsafe. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of residents feel like we need to reclaim our downtown for the residents, but also, of course, we need to keep the tourists and the tourist dollars that they bring to Sausalito. So I'm really interested in developing a permit program that would help bring the bike rental companies to the table and kind of help to mitigate some of the negative impacts on our community while keeping our vibrant tourist trade going.
That's a huge project. And what are some of the other projects that you'd like to accomplish should we be lucky enough to have you representing us here in Marin?
Well, one of my top priorities is I'm the only candidate that supported Measure F, which was to improve and maintain our parks. And now we've got the really hard job to actually get the funding and get those parks fixed up and ready for use. So that's going to be a big project, and that's something that will be a priority for me.
We're here with Susan Cleveland-Knowles. We're waiting for results. Good luck to you, and I hope it goes your way.
Great. Thanks. I've got my fingers crossed.
That's Larry Strick from Sausalito. It was recorded before the initial vote tallies were released, but Susan Cleveland-Knowles has a very comfortable lead there and will be elected to the Sausalito City Council. Now, Greg, you mentioned this realignment of towns moving to even-numbered years. And in Tiburon, they're dealing with that. There are 2 people, David Kulik and Holli Their, who were appointed to the council in the past year, and they are standing for election at this time. But will they have to stand for election again next year?
Some extended their terms 3 years, some extended their terms 5 years. Every city is a little bit different. Tiburon was also a unique case like Sausalito. They had 2 resignations at once. That almost never happens.
Yeah.
So they appointed these 2, but they didn't want it to go a year till their next election. So they said, if we're going to appoint 2, we better have them run for retention, if you will, this fall. So they did. So they just got appointed in June, I think it was, and here they are running for re-election immediately. And the 2 appointed incumbents are winning handily against the 3rd candidate, Jack Ryan, I think is his name.
You're right.
Yeah. And we will have Holli Their in a minute as soon as you're ready, one of the 2 winners.
I think we can go to that report now. Here's Larry Strick with Holli Their in Tiburon.
Okay, Peter, Greg, I'm here with Holli Their. Holli's an attorney who was recently appointed to the Tiburon City Council. Town Council. I'm sorry, Tiburon Town Council. She's lived here in Tiburon for quite some time, and this is her first run at running for the council. How'd the campaign go?
I think the campaign went great. It was such a pleasure to meet everyone living in Tiburon. That was the highlight of the campaign.
Well, the election results are not in. We do know that the mail-in ballots are counted. You have a commanding second place spot, which is good enough for election. They usually hold still. What did you hear from the people here in Tiburon that, what'd you learn about your city that would help you be elected?
You know, I learned a lot from the voters in Tiburon. I learned that voters in Tiburon really love our town. They love the unique character that we have here. They would like something to be done about the traffic on Tiburon Boulevard, and also they'd like to keep the Martha property as open space. Those were the 2 key things I learned.
So the Martha property, tell us, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I would like to see Trust for Public Lands and another organization possibly purchase the land for fair market value. I think that is the best thing that could happen.
And is that one of your goals? And tell us a little bit about your other goals for being elected, because things are looking good.
Well, I'm a little superstitious, so I'm not going to call anything until it's official. But you know, one of my biggest goals is to preserve the Martha property as open space. I do believe that you know, right in Tiburon we have 250 acres of open space. The Martha property is 110 acres. We need to preserve that.
I'm assuming that the folks that you ran against gave you a nice race. Do you suggest that people jump in and become electeds? To throw their hat in? Was it a good experience?
You know, I think it's a great experience, and I think anyone that has a passion for public office should definitely run.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us in your lovely home, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Please stay.
I can't.
That's Larry Strick, our roving reporter. And I want to mention, Greg, that we're delighted to have this high-tech gear now so that Marin TV can go remotely almost anywhere in the county. And Larry's roving all over the place tonight, Sausalito, Tiburon, Fairfax, San Anselmo, and we've sent him by motorcycle to Novato, and we'll get a report from him hopefully before the end of the hour. But you were telling me a little bit about Holli Their. She moved from San Francisco in the last few years, and she's been active in the state Democratic Party and the League of Women Voters.
Head of the League of Women Voters in San Francisco, very active for quite a number of years apparently. I saw her at the same couple of candidates forums countywide for the Democratic Party and the Marin Women's Political Action Committee, both of which endorsed her as well. But suddenly she moves to Tiburon, getting involved in Tiburon, and is appointed to and now apparently elected to the City Council in Tiburon. To her credit, she seems terrific, and she's yeah, very good.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Now, on the bottom of your screen, you're seeing the latest results from the Registrar of Voters, and we will mention some of those, but you can capture the information right there on the screen as you're watching the program. Still to come tonight, Kevin Morrison will be joining us in studio, the challenger in Novato, and we also have Larry Strick reports with Bruce Ackerman and John Reed from Fairfax, and he is on his way to Novato, hoping to catch incumbent Denise Athas, who is on track to win re-election tonight. There are also some community service districts, Greg, in Marin City and in it's Muir Woods, right?
Actually, yeah, Muir Woods Community Service District. Those are the only two races that were contested and on the ballot besides the 5 city council races we're covering. And we don't have any candidates interviewed or coming in. But one of them in particular is pretty good sized, often very contentious, and turns out to be very close. The Marin City Community Service District had 6 or 7 candidates, and it kind of broke down into 2 slates. Each one had an incumbent or 2 and some new candidates. And it looks like one slate is mostly winning, and one slate, including an incumbent, is mostly losing.
Yeah, that's Royce McLemore, who's been active in Marin City for years.
She has, and I'm not sure how many terms she's been on, but the winners in Marin City Community Service District look like incumbent Donald Parker, incumbent Gerald Norman, and Ken Matejka, who's a new candidate, but I think ran as a slate with those 2. The next 3 slots are Royce McLemore, who is an incumbent, but she's only 3 votes behind the new candidate,
Right.
Ken Matejka,
Yeah.
according to this, and it's changing all the time.
Well, and these numbers are very small, let's be clear about that.
100 votes or so.
Yeah, the top vote getter there has 128, and McLemore is in 4th place with 98. So this could shift, certainly, as we get to 100% of votes counted. But it is interesting. We've seen, Greg, as you and I have watched the vote counting in Marin, it's very unusual that the initial numbers that are reported from the mail-in ballots that were counted today shift and really change when the final certification is reached.
Sometimes a point or 2 changes, but rarely more than that.
Yeah.
The numbers that you get initially at 8:05, representing the majority of all votes cast by absentee voters. Absentee voters there is the old term. Vote by mail voters is the new term. Pretty much stick, although it looks like some new Marin City totals are just coming up here. And as I say, since they're all so close, some of those positions could flip a little bit.
Okay,
But
here they are on the screen. And in fact, Royce McLemore is, oh, I see, these are alphabetical. So,
yeah. Royce McLemore is 19.19%.
So she is in the top 3.
Yeah, Ken Matejka dropped way down to 12%. In fact, Royce McLemore looks like the leading vote getter. Terry Harris Green, who's a former board member, a friend of mine, is now in 2nd place instead of 5th. And 3rd place is Donald Parker, another incumbent. So those, just when I said that they don't flip around too much, the Marin City Community Service District really is flipping around a lot. But again, it's still early. Not a very high percentage of the votes have come in. Although by the end of the evening,
it's a very small universe, so this kind of flipping is not surprising.
We'll probably know by the end of the night, although not necessarily, because there's still 10 or 20% or whatever of the votes called provisional votes. Unlike the votes which were cast before Election Day, the vote by mail voters, and the Election Day voters, the provisional voters are Election Day voters that turned in their ballot but forgot to bring their vote by mail ballot, so they have to take a few weeks and count a whole lot of things to make sure they didn't vote twice, both by mail and at the polling place.
Yeah. Now, there are also a number of local ballot measures where communities have, are looking at approving or rejecting certain measures.
One quick note on the final candidate, the Muir Beach Community Service District. The one thing I want to say about that is it's very, very tiny, even much smaller than the Marin City Community Service District. They have like 150 voters in the whole district, so that means how many of them are going to vote? 100? They had a candidates forum where 85 people showed up. There's a pure democracy at its best.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what mailers they send out, it doesn't matter what endorsements they get. That race is decided at that one candidates forum a month or 6 weeks ago because most of the voters were there and watched them and made their decisions. And there you had 3 incumbents, or 2 incumbents out of the 3, running against 3 former incumbents. And the challengers are winning.
Wow, it is interesting. It's like the old New England town halls where the real community power is felt. Kevin Morrison has arrived, so he'll be joining us in the studio here in just a few minutes. But let's recap the Lagunitas School District Measure A requires a 2/3 vote, and in the latest numbers that I have, they're on the screen now, but what I'm showing is that it is trending to pass with 69% saying yes.
It's close. I think earlier this evening it was not getting the required 2/3. So the school bond measure is is close. Is that a school bond measure or partial tax?
It's a school district, so
Yeah.
that would be a parcel tax, I think.
Okay, I should know, but I don't. Measure B, City of Larkspur, I think is a sales tax. And it only needs a majority, and it has nearly 2/3, so that looks pretty safe.
There are a lot of potholes in Larkspur.
They say they're going to dedicate that to road repair. Whereas Larkspur has notoriously bad roads and is rated very poorly in the entire Bay Area.
And to our elected officials who are thinking about, like Barbara Kohler said, and the Larkspur situation, in San Anselmo, we got some repaving with what I think is a substandard product. It's like a sealant instead of putting a layer of blacktop on the roads. And I'm not very happy with it. So please go for the good stuff, will you? It'll last a lot longer.
Now, there were two measures in Novato, both somewhat controversial, although the first not as controversial. Novato's the only city in Marin that has a green belt, and in Sonoma County, most cities have a green belt, but Novato's the only one. And this was a renewal of that green belt, and it just required a majority, and it has 72% currently. So it looks like that's going to safely pass. But the other one was a much more controversial. It's a flood control tax, and that requires 2/3, and it's currently got
Two-thirds
just
no.
exactly 2/3. 2/3
That's
no.
2/3 no.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
So that looks like it's going down big time there.
I guess everybody in Novato already has a lifeboat.
Well, just as flood taxes are controversial in the Ross Valley, apparently they are in Novato as well.
Yeah. Well, and I honestly don't know the details of that flood district, but the Bahia area is at risk for sea level rise, and there are a lot of areas there along Highway 37 where the king tides flooded last year. So Novato does have a number of areas that are at or below sea level, and it's interesting that voters are rejecting that. Maybe Kevin Morrison will have some comments about that when he joins us in a moment.
But since he's not seated here with us, but he presumably will be in a few minutes.
We've got one more measure,
yes,
and that's the very small district in Bolinas, Mesa Park Recreation District, and that is trending to pass. There are just over 200 votes that have been tallied there, and the margin is 75 to 24%. So as we mentioned, Kevin Morrison will join us, the challenger in Novato, and as we get set for him, we're going to switch to Larry Strick's interview recorded about an hour and a half ago with Bruce Ackerman in Fairfax. Take it away, Larry.
Peter and Greg, I'm in Fairfax at the liveliest party that we've made it to so far at Bruce Ackerman's house. Bruce is an engineer and someone who's been on the Fairfax Planning Council for the past, how many years was that?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. It's his first run for the Fairfax City Council. Thanks for having us in your house. Bruce, how did you find running for elective office? Did you enjoy it?
Actually, that surprised me. There were a lot of surprises, but the biggest one was I enjoyed it tremendously. The thing I enjoyed the most was what I actually spent the most time doing, walking door to door. And I pretty well covered all the likely voters in the town, knocked on many, many doors, had long conversations with many people, and I just absolutely loved that. The people of Fairfax are amazing. I learned a lot, and I think we all learned a lot from the process.
What made you throw your hat in the ring?
Well, I was kind of asked to do that by some current council members, but also just have been, of course, aware of Fairfax politics for a long time. And I saw the need for it. We did have one council member who was not running anymore. David Weinsoff is retiring from the council. So there was an opening. And I just felt like the current council members were taking a lot of heat that they really didn't need to take, a lot of unnecessary negativity being thrown at them, and the town wasn't able to really make progress on a lot of things because of all this negativity and having to play defense. And I just felt like if they could get up there and deal with that, I could get up there and try to help them with it. So I'm doing that for them.
So what's your goal? I mean, what's the issue that's motivating you, and what do you think that would be great if you were to accomplish in your term working with the other members of the council?
Well, overall, I'm passionate about the larger issues that we're dealing with, which really the top level issue is climate change. I mean, that is a big thing that's going on. And one of the results of climate change, of course, is that we have frequent wildfires, more frequent wildfires. So we're seeing that right during the election. We had the incredible fires up north and got everybody's full attention at this point. And I'm still seeing politics being played by some parties in this campaign about who aren't in the lead right now. I'm glad to see that, but politics being played about just even how we protect ourselves against wildfire.
Well, the results are not in yet, and things are looking good over here, and that's great. I got to tell you, wildfires around here look like it would be a problem because we just drove up here, and do you guys have something in mind to protect the folks around here?
Well, first of all, there already is a considerable amount of planning that's been done. The Ross Valley Fire District and also Fire Safe Marin have a very well-established wildfire plan. They are trying to communicate that to residents and have had several workshops just recently, just since the Santa Rosa fires. But we need to continue to do just a better and better job at getting the very short 1 or 2 sentence message out to every single citizen. Make sure that everybody who moves into town gets the message so that people know what to do in the event of an emergency. We probably also need to make sure that we address the fact that part of that plan is that people are able to get updates through their cell phone or their landline or whatever, and not everybody has a landline, and if they have a cell phone, they may not have cell coverage. So,
well, it's a big task, and things are going well. We hope that the election goes your way. People are running all over the place around here.
Yeah.
Good luck to you, and it's a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for having us in your home.
All right.
Greg, Peter, thanks. We have someone else coming up right away here in Fairfax. Thank you.
thank you.
That's Larry Strick, our roving reporter in Fairfax with Bruce Ackerman. And a little bit later, we'll hear his conversation with John Reed. But we're joined right now in the studio here in San Rafael by Kevin Morrison, who came out of almost nowhere. He's lived in Novato for a long time. He grew up there. But Kevin, welcome to our program, and congratulations on a very respectable third-place finish.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
It's not easy to beat 2 entrenched incumbents. Pat Eklund's this is what, her 6th time running? She served 5+ terms or something.
Yeah.
And Denise Athas has served 2 terms, just won
Yes.
a 3rd term. Both have their own pockets of support that are very strong. And yeah, it's not that you don't have a lot of good strengths, and we've seen in 2 other cities, San Anselmo and Fairfax, where a first-time candidate has done well. But there was an open seat in those 2 races, not in Novato. And you, you weren't exactly a known quantity. You haven't served on the planning commission or anything like some of those other folks, or some other city commission. But you definitely made a splash in a controversial race.
Absolutely, and I'm just pleased to be here because I wouldn't be here if there weren't so many people who wanted an option.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, let me just be clear with our viewers that I did have a business conversation with you a couple of
Yes.
months ago. I do some media consulting on campaigns. And honestly, my reaction was that you've got a lot of potential, but I didn't think that this was your time.
Your reaction is very similar to most people's reaction. And thank you.
But I want to say that you presented yourself very well. You used Facebook, I think, quite effectively. I followed you there, and I saw a number of videos that you put up. You spoke directly to voters about the concerns that you identified as you walked from door to door. And you did challenge Pat Eklund, and it brought out other voices. Now, there's some controversy about, an effort that came from a gentleman in Petaluma who is on the Chamber of Commerce in Novato, and also some blog posts that brought out critical commentary about Pat Eklund. And I want to know how you feel about that now.
So the thing about it is, I feel that putting facts out there and strong opinions out there is part of our job as candidates. And being the outsider in this race, it was also my job to be able to come to the table with something unique. In this instance, I hear about these letters 2 weeks before the campaign is going to be over. So did I wish that they were going to be actually in the public conversation 2 months ago? Yes. but were we able to make a decision right away to run with them, to put them on our website, to say this is an important part of the discussion? Yes. I feel good about it. I don't think there's anything I would do differently unless I could put it into the Wayback Machine and go about 2 months ago and bring it in then.
And these can be difficult issues, because what surfaced is that there are a lot of people who have had experiences with Pat Eklund that they found to be negative. And to see a former city manager, a former police chief, fire chief speak up is kind of remarkable.
Police chief, yeah. It's not a lot of people. It's everyone who's ever worked for or with her on city council. She had 15 people that would not support her for city council and would not go on the record to say that she was not good for Novato. But in addition to those, there were 3 city managers and a former police chief, all of whom said this is not a person who is going to move Novato in the direction it should be.
Mm-hmm. I read that letter from former city manager Michael Frank, as well as the one from the former police chief, both of whom resigned last year, although Michael Frank is now working elsewhere. And I ran into Dick Spotswood last week, and he was pretty worked up about the fact that it's against the rules of ethics, apparently, for a city manager to involve themselves in the campaign of the city council members they're currently serving or former city council members they're serving. So it may well be that Michael Frank has violated those rules of ethics. I don't know if there's any enforcement power or not, like there would be for, say, the Bar Association. I happen to be an attorney where they could get slapped and sanctioned. But nevertheless, that bothered some people that a city manager would come out and speak so strongly against a former council member he served. But he had some good points. He said the former 2 city council members also resigned because of Pat Eklund, and that it was incredibly difficult. And a lot of people agree with those sentiments. And you didn't initiate those letters. You just used them to say, look, this is what the city council manager is saying, and it's hard to blame you for that.
Well, thank you. I think it's hard to blame me for that too. But be that as it may be, what is important is, well, first of all, Dick Spotswood, don't take his word for the notion that this is against the rules of ethics for former city managers. There are no rules of ethics for former city managers. And the fact that he said he came forward reluctantly, never wanted to ever do this again, shows how much he was trying to respect the unwritten rules of being a public servant in a town like Novato. But it's so compelling that he came forward, and so strongly. I mean, you see people who have watched a lot of political races say, I have never seen anything like this.
And let me say that I have not read the ethics clause for city managers, but I have a hard time seeing, I certainly understand that a city manager should be neutral while he or she is serving. But I don't see that they sign up for a lifetime gag order when they leave that position. And as somebody who obviously is invested in the community and has inside knowledge of how things work or don't work, I think it's very valid for them to speak up. Now, if it had been surfaced in a nefarious way, you might complain about that. But on the face of it, I don't see a big problem.
One other minor controversy, I think it was minor, although my colleagues on the League of Women Voters of Marin County, where I serve on several committees, seemed a little worked up about it last Friday when I was at a meeting there. Apparently, when you participate in their televised debates, which they're very good at, they're all very good people, you sign a release saying, I will not use any part of this for anything. And you apparently used a couple of clips from your own performance in one of the League of Women Voters debates on your website. And they were a little worked up about that. And they asked you to take it down, and I'm not sure you did. And I think you two finally took it down. I just read today.
We never actually had any discussion about that. So I can't
There wasn't an exchange of emails? I thought there were.
I exchanged no emails with them. So I can tell you that the League of Women Voters is a great organization. I'm sorry if I've ended up on the wrong side of their stick. I do think that they have a role to play that they are not playing, which is actually arbiters of fact and truth. We did have an extensive email exchange. Did they tell you about that?
I read it.
Because, okay, cards on the table, Pat Eklund lied and lied and lied again at their podium. And if you give her a soapbox and you give her a megaphone and she puts out falsehood after falsehood after falsehood in a self-aggrandizing way, but you do not actually walk that back or give any context to your viewers, I consider that as a disservice to the city of Novato.
In reading your emails, I saw and I sympathized with your desire to have the League of Women Voters play a role where they call out factual untruths.
Right.
And the League of Women Voters tried to play that role 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years ago for a few years, but it's really hard to do both roles. They try to be the neutral monitors and the people presenting these candidates forums, and then they're also going to call out somebody when they think they're being factually inaccurate. In politics, as I'm sure you've learned if you didn't already know beforehand, there's a lot of things that people say, and somebody says, that's not true, that's not true, that's not. And you're never going to sort it all out, and it would go on forever. Sometimes you just say, I think that's not true, and that has to be the end of it. You can't expect a third party like
But
the
there's
League of
no
Women Voters.
opportunity. Their rules say you cannot say that from their podium. I could not have said at that forum, you know what, that's not true. I couldn't have said that by their rules. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with their rules, but they are from another era, and they need to be looked at today to be different, I think.
So Kevin, just one more question I want to ask you about. We were talking a little bit about the flood measure for Novato. Tell us why you think that people so overwhelmingly rejected that.
I think that also is an example of today's campaigning that relies on emotion more than facts. The facts stacked up in favor of yes on E. And the idea that the no on E campaign was able to play on the feelings of please no new taxes, please no new $47 parcel tax, is about emotions winning out over rationality, I think.
Well, it's interesting because I fully support the increase in the gas tax that Governor Brown put into effect, and it just kicked in on November 1st. But it's clear that voters across the state, it's only polling with 55% support, and the Republicans see this as a very ripe issue. And I do find it surprising that people are not willing to tax themselves for things that directly benefit them, like roads that don't break your shock absorbers when you drive, and floods that can cause serious damage.
Kevin is intelligent and articulate and charismatic and a delight to talk to. We could probably talk to him for another hour. Unfortunately, we have about 10 minutes left. We have a live interview lined up and 2 more I'm afraid we're not going to get to.
So thank you guys
Kevin,
for having me. I appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Cheers.
Very impressive debut. Thanks for being with us tonight. Kevin Morrison, who ran for the council in Novato. And now one of the prevailing incumbents is with Larry Strick at the Trek Winery in Novato. Larry, let's talk to Denise Athas.
Greg, Peter, I'm here in Novato with Denise Athas, who is reelected. She is going to be in your third or fourth term? Third term. Second term as mayor.
Right.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very excited.
How is this campaign different than the other campaigns?
It was really the people that I met through this campaign. We have kind of a hidden demographic around here, and it was really this younger generation, the 20s and 30 to 40-year-olds that really haven't had a voice. They haven't been present. And I met up with them. They actually came to me and said that they wanted to be involved in the campaign. I met with them several times, and they really stood behind me. Did a lot of work for me, walked for me, did postcards. But the amazing thing was really learning from them and finding out why all of a sudden do they want to have this voice. And it's a group that's called the Resisters. And there are over 150 of them throughout Novato, all spread out over Novato. And they said that basically the last election with the president, they had their eyes closed and they wanted to have their eyes woken up. And they said now their eyes are wide open. They wanted to get involved. They want to be a part of the future in Novato because they realize it's their Novato and it's their children's Novato.
You seem a little surprised by that. When we were talking before, you said it was a little bit of a shift up here?
It really was. I mean, in the last 2 elections that I ran, it was really a demographic that didn't exist, and they really didn't show up to vote either. They just were living their own lives, being involved, very busy, families, most of them dual income that had children. And they just, don't have the time to be involved, but they realized they were making a huge mistake. And they felt like they were asleep at the wheel. And it was so exciting to see this group that is a different voice that really wants things to change in Novato. They love the character of Novato. They love the slower pace, but they also want to see some, managed growth where their children can actually have birthday parties here in a restaurant and have something to do rather than to go up to Roner Park, which is where they say they go to have birthday parties for their kids. So it was very refreshing, to
So,
see them.
so is that scary or is that a good thing for a third-time city council person? How does that change the calculus of what you guys decide?
I couldn't be more excited. I mean, it actually gave me a sort of a rejuvenated, attitude, knowing that there's this. I think there can be major changes in terms of the way businesses maybe will have things in their stores for this demographic to shop in. And they'll be involved in wanting to come to our meetings. They actually have been coming to our meetings, and they're live blogging each other with their computers because most of them are home, but they're interacting with each other with the new technology. And I find it so refreshing and so exciting. I can't wait.
It sounds a little bit different than the Not in My Neighborhood group that you hear about all over Marin.
Yeah, we do have that. We definitely have, I think, a broad spectrum, of people. But what I like is the idea that, because we also have a new business community that's been meeting, and they also want to stand behind Novato and get some things done and make their voices more heard. So there's been different things happening from this. I'm hearing different voices, which I find very good, because what you want is to get a balance. You want to hear, from the people that have been here forever who don't want growth, but you also want to hear from the people that are moving in. And I feel that we're going to have a more balanced Novato. I'm really excited.
So what's your goal, your one goal for, if you could accomplish something in your next term, what would be a good outcome for you?
I would really love to see some things happen. I think we're on the cusp. We finally have some money. We have a balanced budget right now, but we need the revenue to really secure that. We have a theater that's sitting here that is ready to reopen, we hope, in the next year or so, our downtown theater. But we need those voices. We need the community. But I really think that we're on the cusp of having some things happen, and happen in a way that I think will be really good for Novato.
Well, Denise, congratulations on your victory. Novato seems to be in good hands with you moving forward. Good luck in the future. Peter and Greg, thanks for sticking with us. Denise and I are going to sign off.
Thank you so much, and good to see you, Greg. Thanks for coming here, and good luck with your show.
She's exhausted, and so are we. So good night.
All right, Larry Strick with Denise Athas in Novato this evening. By the way, they're at the Trek Winery, and nobody paid me to say this, but they make some really good wines there, and the family that owns it is very community-minded. They host a lot of community events there, so if you haven't been, check it out. And Greg, what is your sense of how Denise Athas has positioned herself? She certainly has a much more positive perception, I think, than Pat Eklund does.
Well, Pat Eklund, Denise Athas seems to be universally loved. I love her too. Pat Eklund, there's a lot of things I really like about her, but she has really been controversial. She said in one of her questionnaires that she takes these positions that she knows will attract enmity, and she welcomes that enmity. It reminds me of FDR saying, I welcome the enmity of the rich people or something. So she does have a lot of strong supporters, and right now they're neck and neck for top vote getter within half a point or something. It's interesting that they each have their separate, and yet neither one wants to directly attack the other. That's where Kevin Morrison, a challenger, comes in, and originally he was kind of speaking harshly about the entire council, which I thought was a mistake, but then he really came out against Pat Eklund. So really, it's probably a good thing that there was a challenge. Incumbents always say, oh, I hope I'm not challenged, then I don't have to campaign. But it's good for democracy, it's good for the candidates, and it's good for the city to have challengers. And so Kevin Morrison filled that role.
It's also tricky to run a campaign that's critical of a female incumbent. And I give credit to Damon Connolly because, as you know, I was a longtime supporter of Susan Adams.
Me too.
And I thought that Damon ran a very strong campaign that was based on what he, described as a need for change. But he never attacked Susan Adams and really let her record and the way she campaigned, which I thought was backward-looking instead of forward-looking in that last race. But he did very deftly defeat her without appearing to be a male who was insensitive to a female incumbent. And so I also give Kevin Morrison credit for running a good campaign as an upstart, and I predict he'll be back.
Could well be.
Yeah.
Well, we have one interview to go yet.
Yeah, Larry spoke to John Reed in Fairfax about an hour and a half ago. And let's look at that interview now. It's the final roving reporter report for this evening.
Greg and Peter, I'm with Mayor John Reed here in Fairfax at the liveliest party still. John, you've been on the council and mayor. This is your second hitch at mayor, right?
Right. It's second time as mayor. I've been on the council 2 terms, so this is 8 years at this point.
And this election was a little bit different than the other ones. How would you describe running for this term as opposed to the other ones?
Well, I guess my first term, there was a field of 7 going for 3 seats again. And that was, that was an interesting race with a lot of debate and a lot of different subjects covered, which was great. It was very interesting. And this one was, there was a healthy debate, but the big change this time was social media, or maybe I should call it anti-social media. Not all of it, certainly, but, there was some nasty stuff in there. So in a reasonably modest-sized small town of Fairfax, California, how does social media get nasty? Well, I think when people sit in front of their computers, tapping away on the keyboard, some of the niceties that eye contact and things like that filter out, don't get filtered out, and some people were emotionally, saying what they felt. Yeah,
a little bit different. I think the folks in there are telling you might have just won. Well,
okay, they're giving me a thumbs up. So maybe
in the voting, John.
Okay, now I guess I'm up number 2 now. So I don't know how many votes that counts. Before it was just the absentees, and I was number 3.
Let's say it continues that way and things are going good for you. What are your plans? What do you hope to accomplish in this term?
Well, I think I'd like to address some of the ways that the public gets information, because that's really what it's said to me, is that it's very difficult for a government to put out accurate information because it's all got to be vetted and it's all got to be right. But really what we're seeing on social media is people put all kinds of different information. It's just their interpretation, or maybe what they believe to be true, or maybe just even what they want to be true. And that kind of distorts the picture a lot. And, I've seen the comment on Nextdoor, for instance, that, 90% of what's on there is made up. And
are you thinking there's fake news being broadcast here in Fairfax?
I guess, to use that term, it could be called that way. But, a lot of times it's people are just, they're looking for news and they're looking for what's out there. But there isn't a good official source, and they're really, unfortunately, what I've been trying to work out with the town manager and stuff, it's really difficult to get accurate, vetted information out there on the fly. You have your staff reports and things like that, and when there's a council meeting, and that's really what, the whole process of decision-making in government is about. But a lot of times there's changing information, and it's got a bunch of different sources, and, and some of it's true, and some of it is, interpreted a different way. So it's kind of hard to get your finger on the pulse of exactly what that is.
Look, hearing you speak and looking into your eyes, it looks like you're really learning how government is really people-to-people thing, and you got to be hands-on in order to know what's going on.
Yeah. A lot of where I come from is community kind of stuff anyway, and so I try to interact with the community in a positive way, and speak to what people are thinking and worried about, or what their concerns are. And it's hard when you're kind of playing catch up with stuff that isn't necessarily accurate. So, that I would like to be able to give people accurate information as much as possible. It's never going to be ideal, but.
Sounds like a great public service.
Yeah.
Things are looking good for you for this next term, and I'm glad for you on that.
Right, thank you.
Peter, Greg, we're going to unfortunately have to leave this party here in Fairfax. John, good luck to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's hope it all comes out great for the community, because that's really what counts. Democracy is good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Peter, Greg, see you soon.
All right, that's Larry Strick. He's been roving all over the county this evening. And just to recap, in Fairfax, you just saw John Reed, who is in narrowly second place. Bruce Ackerman, new to the council, scores in first place with the reporting that we have up to the minute here. And Barbara Kohler, who joined us at the beginning of our program, she is placing third with about 19% of the vote.
And in Nevada, where we had two of the three candidates interviewed here tonight, one on the screen, Denise Athas, a few minutes ago, and Kevin Morrison, who was here in the studio about 20, 30 minutes ago. It looks like, not surprisingly, as expected, the two incumbents, Pat Eklund and Denise Athas, are winning, although they're very close. They're within a half a point of each other currently. And Kevin Morrison came in a distant third, but still an impressive showing for a new candidate running against two established incumbents. And that's the way it looks in Nevada.
And we opened our show an hour ago with Brian Colbert, who is on track to be the top vote getter. He's a newcomer in San Anselmo. And you know, Greg, I thought only Stephen pronounced it Colbert, and I thought that was an affectation.
I thought so too.
So I was calling him Colbert, but apparently he likes Colbert. Kay Coleman and John Wright, the incumbents, are being reelected. And Steve Burdo came in not a distant fourth, but pardon me, he will unlikely make the cut in the election tonight.
150 votes behind, about 2.5+ points.
Mm-hmm.
And Tiburon and Sausalito had those unusual races. Sausalito, because it was usually in even-numbered years, but they had a vacancy. The council couldn't decide who to appoint. They threw it open to the public. There are three candidates, one seat, and Susan Cleveland-Knowles has a large lead for that vacant seat in Sausalito. And in Tiburon, where there were two recently appointed incumbents up for re-election against one challenger, and both those two recently appointed incumbents, David Kulik and Holli Their, are both handily winning re-election, retention, if you will. They're up for their first elections, but they were just appointed 6 months or 4 or 5 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And David Kulik and Holli Their are projected to win in Tiburon.
All right. And we've also been watching the Marin City Community Services District. The current rankings, Royce McLemore in first place, Terry Harris Green second, and Donald Parker third. But as we pointed out, the numbers are so small that when the final tally is there could be some shifting in those rankings.
Especially between the third and fourth place candidates for that third seat. One of the incumbents is in third place, but he's only, what did we say, 13 votes, 15 votes ahead of the fourth place candidate,
Mm-hmm.
who was the third member of the slate, currently being held by the first and the second place candidates.
Yeah. So it's been interesting for these local races tonight. Greg, it's a pleasure to co-anchor this with you again.
Pleasure.
And we want to thank the great people in the control room, Scott Calhoun, Ginger Souders-Mason, Brad Flaherty, and our major domo here at the Marin Community Media Center, Michael Eisenmenger. Thanks also to Tom McAfee, who shot camera in the field with our roving reporter, Larry Strick, tonight. With Greg Brockbank, I'm Peter B. Collins. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Yeah.